It is overtime here again on Old Favorite Friday, discussing incredible classic beers and giving them the love and the attention they so rightfully deserve. And this week we are going with 6 Points The Crisp Pills. Now, 6 Point Brewing, we only have had a chance to feature a couple of their beers on Old Favorite Friday. I love their beers, but this is a brewery. We don't get a lot of their stuff down here. The Pilsner they have right here is a German inspired Pilsner. You can tell that by the ingredients. They talk about they use traditional German hops like Tettnang and Hallertau, and there you can taste it in some of the way that the malt presents a little bit. You do get a little bit bready malts here that you would traditionally get in a German style Pilsner. Their twist, if you will, on this is it's a little Americanized as far as the bitterness aspect of it. It's a little bit higher in kind of the hop presence there. And while they're getting the traditional more floral, grassy, herby hop notes that are going to come off those hops, they're a little more pronounced. So, I mean, not just the bitterness aspect, but probably even on the aromatics and the flavor hops are probably increase a little bit on a recipe like this. In general, the American style Pilsners tend to be a little bit more bitter, and that's not surprising, right? It's an American brewery doing their take on a German style. It's a really nice hybrid, I think, because of that. It's delicious beer. It's incredibly clean and flavorful. And if anyone is following Old Favorite Friday on a regular basis, you know that I love a beer with some bitterness in it, right? So much of the industry has over the years moved away and kind of softened up some of those edges, even on the IPAs and traditionally more bitter styles. And I think there's room for all those kind of beers in the market. But something that delivers that really well integrated, non-astir bitterness like this does is a really, really nice balance to the malt sweetness that is kind of there and underlying. And in a good Pilsner like this, I want to get both of those things. I want to be able to taste that grassy herbiness of the hops. I want to be able to get the bitterness, a little bit of malt sweetness to really round everything out and make for a clean and really, really refreshing beer. And a lot of times, a lot of times when I say the word clean, I've been, people have commented on these videos and also just friends of mine, a good friend of mine named Mike Urevich, he hates using the term clean to describe a beer. He doesn't think that's a real thing. And I kind of get where he's coming from. I think sometimes when you think of clean, you might think of just like light or there's really nothing to it. Maybe it's not the best descriptive word, but it's refreshing. I think clean and refreshing are kind of synonymous one another when it comes to that. But I think more what it talks about is it has a sharpness and a bite to it that gives you that refreshment, that refreshes for the next sip and makes you want to go back in for another sip, which I think is that's what we're all trying to do, right? When we're making a beer, we want you to be able to go back time and time again and not get bored with the same flavor over and over again. And this beer definitely succeeds in that. I mean, making a good Pilsner, we always talk about here is that the more complicated the recipe, the more places you have to hide something, right? So we've done incredible imperial stouts, barrel aged imperial stouts on here. And where it comes to the point where there's so many flavors going on and they're really complex and they're delicious. I love making beers like that. But in those situations, you have a lot of places to hide imperfections, impurities. If you have any kind of problems with fermentation, you can get around a lot of that. And the great thing about beers like this is that there's nowhere to hide. This is about as simple as you can get. There's a couple hops, I'm sure, a couple different malts, one yeast strain. And if you mess this up, if you leave diacetyl in the beer, or you have improper fermentation practices and of any kind, or boil practices, if you aren't using good ingredients, you're going to taste it in the end product. So tasting beers like this from really, really great breweries like these guys, like Sierra Nevada, like Brooklyn, like so many other, the benchmark breweries that are in this country, you get to taste what good brewing tastes like, and you get to see what the real skill in brewing these lighter beers are. I always say at my brewery is that there are beers that I absolutely adore, but if a brewer came in, they would not be my first beer that I would pour them. I would probably pour them my simplest, lightest beer, Single in the Sun, and say, this is one of the things I'm most proud over because it is well made and it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And I just have a lot of respect. I have a lot of respect for a brewery that can kick out this kind of product in this style very consistently. It's an absolutely fantastic brewery. If you have the availability to try their entire line, I mean, I highly recommend you do so because they make good beer. When it comes to Pilsners, a lot of the times when you're trying to pair foods with Pilsners, a lot of people will if you Google search it for so to speak, they're gonna kind of direct you towards like German style fare. It's always pretzels and sausages and things of that nature, and those are good pairings for a beer like this. I thinking more in South Florida, some of the flavors that are typical down here, doing something like a jerk chicken with those real nice spices. Some of the floral and herbal aspects of this beer would go really well with those spices. Plus, the bitterness and the dryness of this beer will really complement and balance out the heat of like a jerk chicken. So that would be a really good option. You can also go with really richer dishes. This is a lighter beer, but because of the crisp nature of this beer, right, and because of the bitterness, it can really stand up to richer dishes. So something like a lobster mac and cheese would actually go really well here because this has enough of that bitterness and that the refreshing nature of it that they can kind of wash your palate, refresh it after that big rich cheese flavor, and some of the fruitier aspects and malter aspects will kind of accentuate the more delicate aspects of something like lobster or shrimp or seafood if you're doing that in your mac and cheese. So just a couple things that you might consider if you wanted to pair this with something this weekend, but highly recommend Sixpoint Brewing. Fantastic people, great beer. You can do a lot worse than having this in your fridge at all times. Another great thing about having a beer like this that is year round that you can always find is that you can have it all the time. And we take those beers for granted because we're always kind of seeking the next rare thing. But we have to remember these are available. These are fantastic for a reason. And we're just so thankful that they're here. Thank you guys very much. Keep the suggestions rolling in for Old Favorite Friday. Please poke around our channel, like, subscribe. We'd really appreciate it so you can get these videos automatically. And we'll see you next week. Cheers.